Hi, thanks for coming to watch my video. I know what you're thinking. Please, not another true crime video. But yeah, it's another true crime video. My name is Lisa Deets, and this is All the Deets. I've been following true crime for many, many years, long before it was cool to do so. But I've been doing it on Facebook and other platforms who just don't seem to appreciate my sass. So I've decided to go to the video route. I have been watching quite a few. I follow quite a few. I follow a couple girls who are amazing. Um, However, don't expect me to do makeup while I do mine because while you'll be expecting me to look like Cindy Crawford, I'll probably look like the killer clowns from outer space. Makeup is not my thing. Um, so I have been watching a few. I have been watching a couple, just not these women, other ones. And some of them just, one of them just read a paragraph off of Wikipedia in some strange robotic voice. So I am nosy as hell, and when I do research, I make the FBI look lazy. So what I figured is I'll come on here and show you stories with all of the details, at least all that I could find. That's why it's called All the Deets, and I'm Lisa Deets, as I said. A few side notes right now. I am new at this. This is my first time. I'm not a video entrepreneur. I'm not even sure that's the right word. I am not an expert at video. I'm going to stutter. I'm going to cheat on my little teleprompter notes down here. I am going to trip over words. I'm probably going to repeat myself. I'm probably going to mix things up. But if you bear with me as the videos go on, I'm sure I'll get much better. However, just to keep things fun, if you want, every time you see me screw up, take a drink. We'll make it a drinking game. By the middle of the video, you won't give a shit what I'm saying or how I'm saying it. So it's a win-win for everybody. So I guess we should just get started. Today's story is going to be about Ed Gingerich. Ed Gingerich was, as I'm sure most of you already know, the first Amish person convicted of a murder. He was from my home state of Pennsylvania. I did a lot of research on this. I found conversations that I have never seen before, and I have known about Ed for many, many years. So I was very surprised. I hope that everything I explained to you is the absolute 100% truth. I do as much research as I can to be sure that it's true. If something gets through that is not, I apologize. But I do my due diligence as much as I can to be sure that I will never give you anything false. That doesn't mean it won't slip in. Let's not forget that I'm older. I'm pretty sure I have some kind of senility kicking in somewhere along the line. I don't really, but I use that as an excuse when I mess up. So let's get started on today's story. Again, like I said, it's Ed Gingerich. Get your booze ready because I'm already ready to stare at my notes here. So just give me 2 seconds. Go ahead and take your first drink. Ed Gingerich was born August 18th, 1965. Now I know a lot of places are saying he was born in 1966. Some are saying they couldn't find his birthday at all. Me, being the snoop that I am, I actually pulled up his Pennsylvania crime record, and his birthday is August 18th, 1965. So I think we're going to stay with that date. That seems to be the most reliable. He was born to Dan and Mary Gingerich. He is Amish, obviously. He is one of 11 children. They have a lot of children in the Amish families. They're just, I've met many Amish people. They're wonderful people. We have a nearby flea market. I'm gonna do a lot of these tirades off to the side here because that's just what I do. I'm what you call a talker. But anyway, we have a flea market here, and sometimes if you go over there, they're always there, surprisingly using a lot of electricity, which shocked me. But they make the best food ever. They make the best cookies in the entire world, and pies, and everything is homemade and wonderful, and they're really, really awesome. I do have to admit, though, since I researched Ed and the Amish community so much, I didn't really research the community, just what pertained to Ed and his story. But now I have a hard time looking at them the same. Now I worry when I look at them, I see them, I'm thinking, oh, are they going through something, or are they not? Like, it's just my own mind going in the wrong direction. But anyway, let's get back to Ed. Ed was born in, let me see, I'm cheating, get a drink. He was born in Rockdale Township, which is in Crawford County, Pennsylvania. Now, Crawford County is the farthest you can go west without heading into the state of Ohio. And of course, this is the United States, for those of you who are not from the United States. Pennsylvania is just about on the East Coast. We're real close to the shores and stuff. Ohio is the next state in. I am in a location which is the farthest you can go east in Pennsylvania. They are the farthest you could go west. So we are very, very far away from them. Some of the Irish people, I did this, side note again, I already recorded this. I just forgot to hit the record. And even during that one, I kept saying Irish. I don't know why I said Irish. Anyway, but some of the Amish people moved to Crawford County from Canada and Ohio, and I want to say it was back in the 1980s, but that just seemed like a typo. I'm thinking 1880s. However, do not take that as gospel because I just don't know. I'm going to say that 1980s. Take another drink because that just seems mostly what I read. I know the Amish people have been here for a long, long time. So this group is actually Abe Troyer Amish. They came about in the 1940s when Bishop Abe Troyer had splintered from another group of Amish in Ohio over some ridiculous things about the size of a hat brim and also shunning. I don't know if he wanted to shun or he was against shunning, but he had splintered off into his own. It's called the Abe Troyer Church Amish, and Ed and his family were part of this. Okay, let's see. I know I'm cheating. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Let's see. I did try to find more on Bishop Troyer, but he really wasn't relevant to Ed's story, and there were so many, so many that I didn't know. I didn't know which one was which, so I just really didn't delve too far into that for fear of going in the internet rabbit hole that I always end up in. Troy Amish are very, very conservative, of course. They are not allowed to have carpeting, no linoleum floors, no indoor plumbing. The only lights they could use are to be run by oil, no electricity, of course. Geez, let me think. Yes, I know I'm cheating. They are forbidden to ride into a car inside of a car unless it's an emergency. They do allow themselves to work with the English world. They allow themselves to participate, like I said earlier, in the flea markets and tourists and things like that, tourist attractions and stuff. So, they do compensate their income with that. I don't know if compensate was the right word either. Okay, so Ed himself loved machinery. Ed was all about machinery. He was considered a master mechanic. He loved diesel engines. Now, keep in mind, not all machinery is what's allowed in the Amish community. They have specific, strict limitations on what they're allowed to use. Ed had a hard time with this. It was a big point of contention for him. He fought against it, if not inside his mind, most of his life. He became what they called moody and a rebel. He was described, I'm going to look at my notes for this, he was described as an engaging, mechanically creative Amish man. However, with their limitations, it would have to have some effect on him to constantly be told that this thing that you are so wonderful at, like he just excelled. Englishers, everyone came from miles and miles to go to Ed's machine shop because he was just so good. He was a master mechanic. But I couldn't imagine what it would be like for your community. Ed was very, very community oriented. He was very, very faithful. He was into his faith and his family, and that's all he knew. And he loved that, but he also loved mechanics, and this was a big issue for him. I cannot imagine being told all of your life that what you are the best at is wrong or sinful. Now, I don't know if that's what they said to him, but I imagine it was somewhere along that line. Excuse me. Okay, I'm looking again, so you better take a drink. I hope you have a big bottle because I'm going to look quite a bit, I think. I just see that coming. Let's see. Ed was considered a rebel. This again was because of the limitations he felt that were, it wasn't on a selfish level with Ed. He wasn't concerned about himself in this machinery. He was concerned about what he could do for his people with this machinery. He knew that they could just excel so much faster, and they use those big horses for plowing and things like that. I imagine they would allow him to use machinery like, other farmers do, they could just multiply their success. However, that was not to be because that's not how it worked in that community. It was no secret in the Amish community that Ed had issues with his faith. He felt the restraints that were holding him back from a more exciting life. Now, pardon me, I have read many, many stories about people who were unhappy, people who had felt that they wanted to make their life more exciting. Mostly it involved the other sex, like it involved, if it was a man, it usually involved women or drinking or Ed had none of those thoughts. As far as I know, he had none of those inclinations. It was all about the machinery. He had a shop by his home, which he just loved. Ed wanted to move forward. I know you saw me looking. Ed wanted to move forward with what he knew was out there in the English world of mechanics. He knew the progress his community could make, but he just wasn't able. It was very, very, I imagine it must have been, very like torture for him to not be able to do what he knew he could do and what he loved. But that's enough. That's enough of that. Okay, so Ed was thought to be a moody sort, and his rebellious nature left some uneasy feelings in the community. Some of the elders, as well as his parents, and some higher ups, one of the bishops, of course, felt that, and I'm going to read this because this is kind of funny. Here's what his thoughts were, their thoughts were, excuse me. They felt that if he were to marry a good, faithful Amish woman, it would fix him. And actually what their thought process was, what they said was, I'm sorry, not thought process. It was said that it was the belief that an unwavering, faithful woman would be a good influence on the troubled young man. So along comes poor Katie Shetler. Katie Shetler was also from the same Amish community. She was one of 16 children of Levi and Emma Shetler. 16 children. Could you imagine? Where would you put 16 children? Why would you want 16 children? But to each his own. Let me see. I know I'm looking. Katie had come from a very large, very strict Amish family. She was groomed since she was born. I don't know if groomed is the right word. That sounds bad. She has been taught her whole life that it comes in the order of faith, family, and of course, it is taught, and I believe, if I say the word correctly, when you leave your parents, when you become married, you leave your parents and you cleave to your husband. I'm going to use the word cling because cleave just sounds weird. It sounds really bad, especially in this situation. But she believed that. She was a faithful woman. She was described as having every aspect you could want in a good Amish woman. Again, on a side note, I'm going to try to edit this correctly. I don't know if I'm even going to get to be able to do that because I'm, again, not an expert. I do have pictures of everything I would like to show you. If I cannot edit it to show you the pictures at the time, I will try to edit them in the end. I was going to just like flashcards. If I have to, that's what I'll do the next time just to make sure that you get all the information. Okay, so I'm gonna cheat again, so get your bottle. Let's see. Locals described Katie as kind, hardworking, and devout, having the very qualities that the Amish hold in high regard. Now, I know that was a repeat, so you could drink with that one. Many people in the community felt it was not a good thing to connect Katie to Ed. Ed was known to be moody, as they called it. He was known to have odd behaviors, nothing out of the ordinary, I don't want to say they were crazy, out of the ordinary, outlandish at this point, but he was considered a rebel. He was moody, and they knew that he had issues with his faith, although as far as I have seen anywhere, it was only, again, with the machinery. A lot of people felt uneasy about it. However, no one said anything, no one spoke up, and no one said anything until it was too late. And I really, and this is just my opinion, which I'm going to try not to put that in there too often, but I can't help it. I'm opinionated. Excuse me. I'm going to say that I think their ability to not speak up was a huge issue in this situation. I would never discuss someone else's faith in a negative manner. I'm respectful of everyone else's options and choices and lives. And however, I have to wonder well, I'm getting ahead of myself now. Let's just go a little bit further, and then I'll be able to tell you that, and then you'll understand it better. I'll just confuse you now if I say it now. Okay, but anyway, So again, like I said, she was she was the niece of a very respected bishop. So I guess who's going to say anything against the bishop? And as far as I understood, Katie's parents, the bishop, and Ed's parents had concocted this marriage. I don't know if that's the right word either, but they had planned this marriage. And again, a lot of people were nervous. I mean, Katie was this wonderful, calm, very faithful Amish woman, and Ed was a moody rebel who wanted to do things outside of the church. He did not do things outside the church, but he wanted to. Okay, so I know I'm cheating. Nice. Ed and Katie got married in 1987. They had their first child, Daniel, right after they got married. Not, the respectable 9 months, whatever. They had their first son, a little boy named Danny. After Danny was born, it was said that Ed just had no interest whatsoever in Katie or the baby. He found solitude in his workshop on his property. He had a wood shop there. It was a wood shop that he did the engines in. He did lumber. He did all kinds of things. After Danny was born, I was very surprised that after Danny was born that they had 2 more children. They had Enos, and then I believe the next year, and then the year after that, they had a daughter named Mary. Excuse me. Now, I do want to say that I was very surprised that they had more children, only because it was said that he had absolutely no interest to her or the children. He did not want to go home. He spent all of his time in his shop. But they had more children, so I guess he liked her a little bit somewhere along the line. But and I don't think that it wasn't that I don't think he didn't that it was that he didn't care for her. I think he just was only able to do what he was able to do mentally. So this was not by any means a happy marriage, of course. In fact, it had the opposite effect of what everyone had hoped. They had thought that connecting Katie to him would have Katie rub off on him, and he would become a better Amish person, a better man. I don't mean better, I mean better for the community, and that's not what happened. In fact, Ed became more and more moody. He just didn't want to be bothered. He found refuge in the sawmill, like I said. And yeah, I'm looking down so you can take a drink now. Like I said, he loved the repair of the diesel engines. His skill had earned him a reputation as a master mechanic, which is, I'll tell you what, that's some accomplishment. It really is. But like I said before, in a religious community that frowns upon worldly machinery, it has to be rough for someone who is just so good at it and loved it so much. He just loved it that much. It's just, I know it sounds a little overzealous, but he just really did. That was just his thing, I guess. So Ed became more and more withdrawn from his wife. He did not bother with her. In fact, I read so many accounts of how badly that he didn't want to be around them. That I don't know how. God love Katie. I don't know how she did it. I really don't. Okay, so let's see. I think I'm going to repeat something, so you better get your drink ready. Okay, so all through their marriage, Ed had become increasingly moodier and moodier and moodier, which is expected considering. Now, to someone who is, and remember this statement for later, who is familiar with mental illness, his actions were obviously not of a natural nature. He would. He would just do some things. I'll tell you in a few minutes, but I just want to get back to Katie for a minute because I don't want her to get lost in this story. Because although this is a story about Ed, this is a story about Katie. Katie, like I said, she was a nice Amish girl. She was trained from an early age to accept that when you married, you clung to your husband. She lived on faith. She lived on her faith, and she loved. She really did love her faith, and she followed it. So when you say to her, you cling to your husband, she did that. And she did that with all that entailed. And that entailed sticking by Ed no matter what he did. no matter what his behaviors were. And Ed's behaviors, oh my. Ed would do outlandish things. He would just walk around the house on all fours, not walk, crawl around the house on all fours. He would bark. He would growl. He would howl at the moon. He would cackle like a madman. Um, I know I'm cheating on my notes. There were times, and this is what struck me the most was this, is when I knew how sick he was, that he would crab walk around the house. I don't know if you know what that is. It's when you go back like this and then you walk. I don't know how people do it. At my age, I would probably break everything, 4 hips and 2 shoulders if I did that. I only have 2 hips. But anyway, he would actually crab walk around the house, spitting all over the place because he thought he was a spider and he thought he was spitting webs around the house. I mean, that's just sad. Now, Katie, she did what she could do. She was just a woman. She had no idea what was going on. She was not familiar with mental illness. Most people in the Amish community, surprisingly, I could not find any Amish psychiatrists or anything like that. So I was very surprised. But they're just not familiar with that kind of thing. Everything for them can be healed by the church. So Katie would have to call Ed's brother sometimes. He would just get so outlandish, and she would be frightened, and she had 3 small children that she would call his brothers. It was usually Dan, Atlee, and Joe doesn't come into the story until the very end, so I don't know where he is at this time, but they just say a lot about Dan and Atlee. Dan was named after their father, and their son was named after him as well. So Katie would call Dan. She would yell, not Dan, sorry. She would call Danny, the little boy, and yell, Danny, go get Uncle Dan, or go get Uncle Atlee, go get your uncle, tell them Daddy's sick and to hurry. And that's what she would say. And then he would run and he would get one of his uncles or both of his uncles, and they would come and they would literally hog tie Ed to keep him from hurting himself. I mean, and to just try to calm him down. They said they were helping him. I was very surprised. Sometime down the road where they were interviewing one of the brothers outside of the courthouse, where he had said, we never thought anything violent would happen, which surprised me again, because if you're hog tying someone to keep them from hurting themselves, and by this time, Ed was saying some bad things about Katie, about his feelings about Katie. And, I don't know how you didn't see anything violent coming. But anyway, I was not there, and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not going to opine on that. Poor Katie had to have been terrified. She had to have just been terrified. I could not imagine. But again, you cling to your husband, and that's what she did. Sometime in 1992, I know you saw me cheating, it became somewhat commonplace for Ed to growl, howl, bark like a dog, or just to start cackling like a madman while walking around the house. He would randomly begin raving about the devil, about hell, Satan, or whatever you call him, God. At times, he thought Katie herself was the devil. He thought she was a demon, and he sometimes felt she was holding him captive in the Amish community, because I don't want to assume what he was thinking, but I would think that now that he is married with children, now he knows he can never leave. So I don't know if that played a part of it. However, I will tell you where that idea came from in a little bit. And when I do, you'll understand how bad it was. Okay, once, to get away from Katie, who at that time he thought was the demon or the devil, he literally jumped out the window. And his family his brothers, now I only see his brothers coming, but his brothers had to literally get in a horse and buggy and chase him down. I don't know if he injured himself. I do have pictures of the house I'll show you. It doesn't look like anything was very high. It looks like a single level home. However, I really couldn't tell. I'll show you that later if I can. Hopefully I can. So these episodes were even starting to scare Ed's brothers. They were at a loss. They didn't know what to do. And something that is very odd for the Amish community, they started calling 911 for assistance. I'm going to cheat now for a second. Let me see. Now, that's saying something for a community who does not invite the English people into their world. They are very, very private. They handle everything within the church or their own, what have you. I believe they're called eye readers or healers, or you'll hear about that later on in the story as well. Once when the police were called, they arrived to find Ed having an all-out brawl with his brothers. I know it's not funny, I'm sorry. But they had called the emergency services, and this was back in a time before, now I believe the police always come first to secure the area. But at that time, that's not what happened. The ambulance came first, and they were, I'm sorry, it's not funny. They were having an all-out brawl with Ed. Now, Ed was a big man. Ed was 6'3". He was a strapping, big Amish man. He was a strong man, and I imagine his brothers were too, but sometimes they say when you're not well mentally, you tend to have a super strength. And Ed was in the middle of an all-out brawl between his brothers and the ambulance guys, just trying to get him into some kind of restraints to get him in the ambulance. And he was winning. And I don't know how many people there were, but you're figuring at least 2 brothers and 2 ambulance crews. So, but I think Ed was kicking ass. I think Ed was winning. So, excuse me. So let me go back here. Oh, I'm going to repeat myself. This is the part where I had discovered where they had said they didn't think he would do anything violent, and I was just completely shocked at why would you not think that? And I know it's not funny. I'm sorry. Sometimes I just laugh at just, some things are, if I don't laugh, I'll cry. Some things are just crazy, ridiculous, So anyway, Katie was perplexed by Ed's odd behavior, but she hoped that prayer and time would heal all wounds, because that's what her faith said. So she prayed and prayed and prayed. And that's what she did. By this time, Katie and Ed were married. They were married for 6 years. I'm cheating again. And until Ed's most recent relapse, these behaviors kicking in so badly with the spitting and the spider and the demon, calling her the demon and the devil, she just kept it between her and Ed. She dealt with Ed, and then when need be, she called the brothers. But they never went to anyone else. I cannot imagine the fear that she felt, but this woman ran on pure faith. She just, God love her, ran on faith, and she just believed and prayed and prayed and prayed that God would remove this demon from her husband. And that's what she thought was going to happen. Let me see. Despite all of this, Katie did try to stay upbeat. It was said that a few days before her final encounter with Ed, that's what I'm calling it, her final encounter with Ed, she had gone to visit her mother. Now, her mother said that she was quiet. She didn't talk about Ed. She normally didn't. Again, with your husband, you stay with your husband. But she did perk up a little bit because springtime was coming, and Katie loved her garden. They call it Katie's Garden now. I imagine it's beautiful. It sounds beautiful. But she was excited about her garden coming, her gardening time coming in the spring, that she was going to work on her garden. Now I'm going to look down because I want to repeat something someone said. Another person later said, kind of pisses me off that everybody says everything later. Family members could not help but notice the strain and change in Katie, subtle though it was. One said, Katie didn't want to say much about Ed, but I could tell she was bothered because she was awfully quiet when she last visited. She did perk up a bit when she talked about her spring garden. Okay. Again, she just loved the garden. Here's the thing, though. Even if everybody fully well knew what was going on in Ed and Katie's house, they would not have intervened. They would not come in. They would mind their own business. Katie's family kept a respectful distance. I know I'm looking down. They kept a respectful distance. There is an unspoken credo in many Amish families, according to Katie's father, and I don't think it's unspoken. I think it's very spoken. It said, no one should come between a man and his wife, Shetler said. That's her father. That is what I was taught by my father. That is what I pass on to my children. Good thing he minded his own business, right? Anyway, during Ed and Katie's marital years, there were some out-of-family influences as well. He did have Englishers who come into his shop. Some were good. Some were not good for him. Being Amish, I would think that they are more patient and kinder than I would have been. There is one guy in particular who I probably would have punched in the face, but that's me. He was a non-Amish man named Dave Lindsay. Dave would come into his shop often, all the time, to hang out with Ed. When he was in there, he would incessantly constantly harass Ed, telling him that he should renounce his Amish faith. Um, I'm sorry, Dave was a born-again Christian. I know plenty of born-again Christians who are wonderful people. None of them would do this. But anyway, um, let's see here. He hounded Ed unmerciful. I know, I'm looking at my notes, about how he should leave the Amish church, and if he didn't, he was going to go to hell. Okay, now as Ed's state of mind continued to deteriorate, because that's what happens with mental illness, he just kept going. Dave just never stopped. He continued to visit him, and he continued to hound him and harass him about his faith. Dave was a dick. Okay, so here's the thing. Dave is the one who told him that he was being confined by Katie. He is the one, it is believed, he is the one who started telling him, relating Katie as the devil, as the demon. Dave was a big dick, all right? Now, I'm no expert on mental illness. However, I have read, as I said, I've been reading true crime for, has to be 30 years. As you know, as soon as, just a long time. I've read many instances on people who are mentally ill. People who have not been raised in religious communities, or people who have not had a religious background, even some of those people tend to become obsessed with the devil and heaven and hell and things like that. You know, so I can't imagine what this guy would be thinking. You can't, I just don't believe, listen, Dave is an Englisher. He's from the outside world. You can't tell me anywhere along his so many years of living that he's never come across a mentally ill person. He was with Ed so often and for long periods of time. I find it very hard to believe that he never saw any point of mental illness or behaviors of Ed's that didn't show mental illness. There had to be some somewhere along the line. And I can't help but think that he used that against him because, you know, he knew his faith. I'm sure he knew, you know, about his contentions, about his rebelness, his moodiness. I mean, in a few minutes I'll tell you about another man who knew just by looking at him. So I just find it hard to believe that Dave did not know and that Dave did not plant this on purpose. I don't know what his reasoning would be behind it. Was he hoping to bring an Amish man from one religion to another? Is that a kudos in his world? I don't know. But whatever it was bad, and Dave is a dick. So anyway, so let me go down. I'm going to look at my notes here. I'm going to look at my little teleprompter because I'm getting up there in age, so my memory is like a plant. Let's see. I already said, it just says again, Dave is a dick. So pretty much Dave is a dick. Okay, so in reference to Ed's illness, and I do want to read this to you because this was something that someone had said. These are quotes. It said, this was an agony that had gone on for more than 2 years. However, I believe it was a lot longer because they'd already been married for 6, and it was going on long before he married Katie. But they had called it moody and things. But anyway, it said, this was an agony that had gone on for more than 2 years. It pained those who witnessed it, that tested it, all who tried to cope with it, and that in the end overwhelmed a simple people's effort to save one of its own. Now, I don't know who they're referring to because the only people I ever read who did anything to help Ed were his brothers. And of course, Katie, God bless her, were his brothers. I never saw an instance where his parents came in. I never see. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm telling you that I read and read and read until I was cross-eyed, and I haven't found any instance of any other family members coming in or anyone else from the community coming in other than Ed's brothers. But now let me tell you about another man here. There was, oh, yeah, the Pennsylvania doctor. Yeah, there's another guy. Should be living with Dave the dick. Okay, so anyway, the Pennsylvania doctor, more on him in a minute. But first I want to say another quote that they had. It said, it saw the devotion of a family plagued by other such illness, but whose members resorted to folk memory remedies, such as scalp manipulations, that's this, molasses supplements, and herbal notions to combat the rapid deterioration of a psychotic. There, that. Did you see that? Let me read that again. The devotion of a family plagued by other such illness whose members resorted to blah, blah, blah. Ed wasn't the first one. He was not the first one in his family. He was not the first one in the community. Ed had not one, but several uncles who had mental illness. This was not new. They knew. They had already seen it. Now, I don't know who all saw it. I don't know if Katie's family was aware of any of this, but I know Ed's parents must have been somewhere along the line. I don't know whose brothers these were. They didn't say if they were her brothers or his brothers, but there was several. So being such a tight community, someone somewhere along the line knew that there was a mental illness in there. Now, again, there's a discrepancy in the year that they had moved to that Amish community. It's the Brown Hill Amish. They're called Brown Hill because of a road that runs through there. I believe it's the Brown Hill Road, of course. But like I said, it said some of them moved there in the 80s, which means they hadn't been there that long. They'd been there less than 10 years before. But again, the Amish, Abe Troyer Amish was a splinter that came about in the 1940s. So I guess they couldn't have been the same people who moved there in the 1800s. I don't know. I didn't really go into it that much, but I was very, very, very surprised that there was previous mental illness in Ed's family. I was very surprised that the bishop and Katie's father allowed them to connect her to him, thinking she was going to cure that. That's just how faithful they were. I know they're very faithful people. They're wonderful people, and this is just me, I have my own faith as well. Whatever that is between me and, myself, but I don't see me sacrificing my child. And I'm not saying that's what he did. I am saying that's what he did. I feel that he was, her father, Levi Shetler, was okay with sacrificing his daughter for the better of the community, which was their goal. The better of this community, the betterment of their community was their goal. So, but that's my opinion. I don't think I would be strong enough to have that kind of faith to do that. Listen, I'd slap somebody if they hurt one of my kids, let alone, and I'm not advocating any kind of violence, but anyway, so let me see here. Now, the fact that they knew about the mental illness, trust me, does not in any way, shape, or form, blame them for anything. I don't know if they probably didn't know what to do. I don't know if these uncles were the first. I don't know if they were all together. I don't know if they were elsewhere when they had been ill. I don't know any of that. So I can't blame that. But I do know that his parents knew. So his parents knew there was something going on. Is this why they stayed away? I don't know if they stayed away. I haven't been able to find anything where they had gone there at all to help. So, listen, hindsight is 2020. It's 2020. We could all say now what we would do or what we think now after the fact. But I really don't know what I would do if I was that faithful and my community depended on that, and I didn't know there was any previous illness, or if I just wasn't familiar with mental illness. I am familiar with mental illness. It's terrible. It's terrible, terrible. I could not imagine. But anyway, so let's get back to this. Ed knew himself that his mental state was taking a toll on himself and his family. He was starting to speak up about what was happening to him. He said things like, I'm going to read these. His heart was loose. He felt like he was drowning inside. He would say, I feel like my brain is boiling over. He would say he had to find himself and that he can't function like this. That's very sad. Ed would later describe how his skin crawled, how his hair tingled, how his brain burned as if there was blinding light in his eyes. He said that at times he was hallucinating, of course. He would see evil giant rabbits outside of his window. He started hearing voices. These voices he was hearing, he was believing was Satan and God fighting over his soul, and he felt that God was losing. And that was terrifying. I'm sure this whole thing was terrifying. Normally now when someone in the Amish community is ill, they have a newspaper, a public newspaper, and I believe it's called The Budget. This newspaper spreads the news in their community. If someone is sick, they will do bedside vigils. I'm sorry, I don't know why I say vigils. Bedside vigils. They will bring people in who will come in to help with your chores. They will send money if you need money. I don't think there were any bedside vigils for Ed because that would be scary as hell. I don't know of anyone else helping them. They could have, and maybe it just never made it to print. I don't know. Let's see. What else is there? The insidious nature of Ed's illness was puzzling to the Amish community, and that's an understatement. One neighbor said, we knew something was wrong, but we just couldn't put our finger on it. They knew there was something wrong with Ed, but they weren't sure what it was. Again, no one remembers the uncles. They must not have known them. I don't know. Okay, so here we get Ed to finally decide to go to a doctor. And now I'm going to tell you about this doctor I mentioned a little bit ago. I'm going to read a little bit down there, so you'll see me looking down. Drink up, ladies, because we're going to have some fun here. This guy is a joke, and I shouldn't say that, but he is. Okay, so Ed had decided to go to the doctor. The one I mentioned a little bit ago, the chiropractor. Yes, I said chiropractor. Okay, his Amish friends had convinced him to go see a local chiropractor named Merritt W. Terrell. Chiropractor. Anyway, Dr. Terrell had a large Amish clientele over 3 states. He was considered the Pennsylvania doctor. He would see Amish clients. He would do manipulations. He would prescribe stuff, whatever. Let me give you a little bit of backstory on Dr. Terrell. You know what? Let me do that one second here. Okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I missed something and I really want you to know this. They had convinced him to go see this doctor months earlier, and he had been seeing Dr. Terrell once a month for 6 months up until his final encounter with Katie. During these times, let me see what it says here. I know I'm starting to stutter. I'm sorry. The sign outside Terrell's office read, Dr. M.W. Terrell, Drugless Therapy. Now, he'd been treating Ed with, what is this? Scalp massages. It's ridiculous. Oh, my hair's still wet. You know why my hair's still wet? Because we were having my argument this morning about if we're going to go this way or this way, and I was losing, so I drowned it. I win. Although now that I see my hairdo, I don't really know how much I won. Anyway, back to Dr. Terrell. He'd been treating him with scalp manipulations and backstrap molasses. Backstrap molasses. Yes. Now that's not what you think it is. Give me a minute, I'll tell you what that is. Terrell testified in court, which he should have been really embarrassed to even do this. I would have never admitted this shit in public. He said he saw Gingerich for 6 months and even treated him on March 18th, which was the day of Katie's last encounter with Ed. He testified that he gave him scalp massages, blah, 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 and molasses, but didn't explain the reasoning behind his treatment. He's an idiot, that's why. Anyway, he charged $50 per visit to do absolutely nothing. He sent this poor family on their way thinking that he was helping them. $50 then is like $93 or $95 now. Okay, so let's go back to the molasses. I want to tell you about that. I did look it up. It is not Mrs. Butterworth on steroids, which is what I thought it was. I was thinking, you know, if I have that on my pancakes, I'd be diabetic before I left the table. It's not. It's actually listed to have some health benefits, and I'm going to read those to you. But you could still drink. I'm looking. Just drink. I don't care. 1 ounce of blackstrap molasses nutrition contains about 66 calories, 17 grams of carbohydrates, manganese, copper, iron, calcium, potassium, magnesium, vitamin B6, and selenium. It helps relieve PMS, which I don't think that was Ed's problem, combat stress, maybe that's what he was thinking, stabilizes blood sugar levels, which I find weird because it's sugar, helps prevent cancer, and promotes skin health. Nothing in there on howling like a dog or spitting around the house like a spider. Weird, right? Anyway, let me give you a little backstory on Dr. Terrell. This might explain some stuff for you here. He got his degree back in 1950, so that says a lot. Now, I know science moves slow, but come on, it doesn't move that slow. In 40-some years, he's given him molasses. But anyway, let's see. Following his graduation from Cambridge Springs High School in 1939, he entered the U.S. Navy, and in 46, he attended Bowling Green University and then Lincoln College of Chiropractic in Lombard, Illinois, where he received a Doctor of Chiropractic degree. In 1951, he set up his office. 1951. This was already 42 years that he was in practice prior to Ed. Okay, so I wonder how many $50 fees he got in those 42 years for doing nothing. I don't know. He set up his practice in drugless therapy and actively maintained that practice until his passing. He died in December of 2006 at the age of 84. That is 55 years of molasses and whatever the hell this is. All right. We have a few more horror stories on this guy, well, at least one anyway. I did look all over to see if there were any charges, any lawsuits, any kind of medical disciplinary action. There was nothing. I was surprised. Nothing. Apparently, this was all perfectly normal, legal, and accepted back then. I mean, back then. It was in the 90s. It's like yesterday. It's crazy. I was amazed. It was seriously amazing that no one did anything. I mean, if not just for what happened to Ed, he did this to other people too. I mean, what did I tell you? Okay. Okay, there was an Englishman who considered Ed and Katie friends. Now, this guy was Sid. This guy seemed like such a nice guy. I'm not going to use his last name because he is very much alive and well on this day. I snooped him out. He's still working on machinery, by the way. His name was Sid. Sid was a neighbor. He had dined with Ed and Katie, and they had dined at his home. He cut lumber. Ed cut lumber for Sid in the wood shop, and in the summertime, Sid would bring ice to Ed and Katie. Now, this is what I was telling you before about Dave, the dick, back there. Sid was very aware of Ed's mental illness. I think he genuinely tried to help him. He had seen him quite a bit in the shop. Now, I don't know if maybe because they had had dinners together, if they discussed things that he would know more about it, but he actually knew when Ed was ill just by looking at his eyes. And I'll tell you that in a second. So here's what Sid said. Sid said he was very aware of Ed's mental illness. He knew Ed as an amiable workaholic and a member of an Amish community whose longer hair and darker clothing marked it as even more traditional than some other Irish Amish in the area. I don't know why I'm saying Irish. I'm part Irish. Okay, but Sid also knew that about a year before this time, Ed had developed a serious mental problem. Again, it had to have been years before, but I imagine now we're at the stage where it's no longer able to hide it if that was attempted, I would imagine. Anyway, Ed had been hallucinating by this time. That was a common thing for him, and he had had a psychotic break about a year ago due to the severity of the outburst. 911 was called. I believe this was when they had come and he was wrestling with his brothers in the ambulance crew. He had been taken to a mental facility in Jamestown, which is about 50 miles away. Sid had driven Katie and several of Ed's siblings up to visit him. And he must have been there a while because it was weeks later that he took them to visit. Ed was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. Not surprised. I just feel it's terrible for everybody involved. But okay, here he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and was given medication. Now his medication eased the hallucinations. However, it made him like a zombie. I'm not really familiar with psychotic medication. However, part of the story that I have here, when I tell you the conversation between Ed and Katie on March 18th, it actually came from someone who was writing a story of anti-psychotic medication. And that's where I got the conversation from. So I'm hoping that it's true. But, you never know if someone's writing something to persuade someone to their way of thinking. So we'll just stick with that for now. So Ed said it made him be in a zombie-like state. Ed was a workaholic. He didn't want to be in a zombie state. He wanted to work. He wanted to be in his shop. He didn't want to be in a hospital. And as soon as he got out, he stopped taking the medication. Now, unfortunately, throughout Ed's life, this would not be the last time. It would not be the last time that he stopped taking his medication, or that, doing that and no one knew, which is why we even have this story. Anyway, Sid said that he did not know that Ed had stopped taking his medication after each hospitalization. He did not know how tortured Ed was. He just, he knew he was ill, but unless you live it, I don't think you could really understand it. I know I wouldn't understand it. He did not know, and I'm reading this, so drink up. He did not know that Ed sometimes had to be tied down, and that there was a similar mental illness among several of his uncles. Again, the uncles. They just keep popping back up. At 4:30 p.m. on March 17th, 1993. Now, Sid said he has no idea what made him do this. He just said it was on his heart, it was on his head to go see Ed that day. He just said he felt like something was wrong, and he just wanted to go, and he did. So he went to Ed's shop. Now, he arrived there about 4:30 p.m. Again, this was March 17th. The day before Ed and Katie's last encounter. Sid said he knew Ed was not feeling well as his eyes were glassy and kind of spacey. He said he asked Ed if he was doing badly, and Ed said yes, he was. Sid tried to help him as much as he could. I genuinely think, Sid cared about him and Katie. Sid said to him about, it's time to see a doctor. He went into the house. Sid and Ed went into the house to talk to Katie because, Sid felt that he needed to see a doctor. And at this time, Ed started talking about suicide. And this was the first time that anyone has mentioned that he's talking about suicide. This really scared Sid. He was worried for his friend. He said that since they're not allowed to drive in cars unless it's an emergency, and Sid considered this an emergency, which I'm sure it was. So he just tried to discuss it with Ed and Katie about what doctor he would go see. And someone had referred them to a doctor in Puxatawny. Now, if you're not familiar with Puxatawny, maybe you know of Puxatawny Phil. That is a town in Pennsylvania where they do the groundhog thing. It comes out of his little hole there. And if he sees his shadow, there's going to be 6 more weeks of winter. He's usually wrong, and I heard he was blind a few years ago, so I'm not even sure how that's working. But anyway, this was actually 100 miles away from where they were. It was already nighttime, and it was snowing, but Sid was like, get in the car, we're going. So they did. I believe it was Sid, Katie, and I believe one of the kids and one of the brothers, I think, and they all went to see this doctor. Now, let me see here. I want to read to you what it said. This was actually, by the way, this was Katie's 29th birthday, and this is how devoted she was to her husband. This is where she spent her birthday, trying to help her husband. I mean, Katie was just, she was amazing. God love her. I don't know how she's so much stronger than I could have ever been, ever. Anyway, so for hours it took him to drive to Puxatawny. The roads were snowy. The whole time they were doing it, Ed was in the back seat, and he was moaning and holding his head. His brother Daniel was with him, and he was massaging his feet. They got there. Sid was saying to him, hang in there, Eddie. He said, we're going to get you help. That's what he said. They got there about 10:30 at night. And when they did, Sid said he was crushed. He was just heartbroken. He said it turned out to be an eye reader or an herbalist. He said, I was just devastated. He said, there was not going to be any help there for Ed. He said they gave them quite a few little vials of herbal medication, just herbs. They had considered it medication. And he said, what a ripoff. And he said, what a shame. So on the way home, I imagine Ed was probably down as well. Ed was lethargic and quiet. Katie had told Sid, I know I'm reading, Katie had told Sid she would bake him some bread for taking them down there. Sid accepted her offer. By the time they got back, it was 2:30 in the morning on March 18th of 1993. Everybody was tired. It was a long night, long, exhausting night. Sid said that was the last time he saw Katie. He took them home and he left. There was really nothing more he could do. According to court testimony, I'm going to read this here. It said Edward passed the night calmly but worsened after morning. He still might have gotten help, though, because he still had a doctor's appointment that day, March 18th. The frickin' chiropractor. What is that? Anyway, Ed complained about hearing voices to the chiropractor, about not being able to sleep, and for the past month, as his state worsened, a family member said that they had kept a watchful eye on Ed. They started spending the night at his house. And again, they said they didn't think anything violent would happen, but I can't help but think that they were there to protect Katie and the children from Ed. That's how far Ed had to come. Again, here they said, we didn't expect anything violent might happen. We just wanted to show our concern for Ed and Katie, to show them that we cared. At this time was March 18th, 1993. One of the Gingerich's non-Amish neighbors, Richard Zimmer, was going to the chiropractor with him. Now, Mr. Zimmer had fallen off a horse back in 1974. This was 19 years later, but it still bothered him. His neck still bothered him. He did recover well, but the neck bothered him, so he was also going to see, he was going to see the same chiropractor, Dr. Terrell. Anyway, Mr. Zimmer came and picked up Ed, Katie, and the children, and there was another neighbor that went as well, and they took him in his truck, and they went to Dr. Terrell's for the afternoon appointment. Mr. Zimmer later stated that Ed seemed really bad. Ed was complaining that he kept saying he had to find himself. He knew he could not function this way. And again, Ed started talking about suicide. I'm going to read Mr. Zimmer's quotes. Don't, Zimmer told him, that's the coward's way out. I don't know what to say to someone who's suicidal, but I don't want to call him a coward. I don't want to say anything to him that's going to make him feel any worse. But some people just, you say whatever you think at the time just to try to help them. So they arrived at Terrell's, Dr. Terrell's, Ed goes in first now here. Terrell testified in court that Ed said he was suffering from sleeplessness, anger, and the sweats. Now listen, I'm not a doctor by any means, but if someone is coming to you for 6 months complaining about sleeplessness, night sweats, hallucinations, anxiety, anger, these are all the things he was telling him. Why did he not refer him to anyone else? I know in the middle of this story somewhere, I did not include it, there was another doctor that they had taken him to who literally, threw them out of his office. They said he is ill. He needs to see a medical professional. He has mental illness. And he told them to take him to the hospital, and they didn't. They took him home. I didn't have the name of the doctor, but I wouldn't have posted it anyway had I had it. But I mean, he knew. So I don't know how Mr. Chiropractor didn't know, this guy with the molasses. But anyway, he said, after Ed was complaining of this, he said, I manipulated him. Now, when he says that, he means this, but he manipulated everybody. And I can tell you why. Terrell testified at Gingerich's trial, I adjusted his head. Someone should have adjusted Terrell's medical license and his head. That's just crazy. That's just crazy, right? I don't understand why he didn't. I don't know. Anyway, Terrell explained later outside of the courtroom that he had administered a scalp massage. That's this. But didn't explain the reasoning behind the treatment. I could tell you why. I could give you 50 reasons behind the treatment. So anyway, let's go back to when Mr. Zimmer and Ed were at the chiropractor. After Ed was treated, Mr. Zimmer went in. Here's what happened with him. He told Dr. Terrell that he was having this issue up in his neck area here, his shoulder, his neck, from this injury. The doctor told him he was getting an infection. He adjusted his toe and told him to come back in a month. His toe. I don't get it. I don't get it. Zimmer said he was then billed $50, and he was outraged, as he should have been. As he should have been. So Zimmer says, he recalled, I got out of there. I says, Ed, you need a doctor. You don't need this guy. I said, I'll help you. I'll get you to a doctor. And that was wonderful if he had that intention of, unfortunately, he didn't realize they were out of time. There was no more time. Ed had reached his maximum that he could take. On the way home, the women were talking. There was a wedding coming. I'm going to have to look because I need the name. Noah and Lavina Hertzler were getting married that day. This was March 18th, the day after Katie's 29th birthday, 1993. They were getting married. The family, not Ed, he was not consulted. He was told that he would not be attending the wedding. He was ill. He was not going to be allowed to go. The brothers, Dan and Atlee, were going to take turns. Atlee was going to go. Apparently this lasts all day or something. I'm not sure, but apparently Atlee was going in the morning, and then when he would come back to sit with Ed, then Dan would go. Ed was not happy. He was furious. He wanted to go to this wedding. So the women were talking about the wedding. Katie planned to drive herself in the buggy, the family buggy, and she was going to pick up her sister-in-law, Anna Gingerich. Now, I'm not sure if she was married to another brother or if she was Ed's sister. But on the way, she would stop and pick up Anna. And again, Ed was just not well enough to go. Okay. So I know I'm losing my space here, right? Okay. So Atlee had gone to the morning ceremonies while Dan was waiting for him to get back. In the meantime, Ed had taken a nap. This is according to court testimony, so I'm going to read it. Ed had taken a nap and awakened angry over not being allowed to attend the wedding. And it was almost time to go. He was unhappy. He stumbled into the kitchen where Katie and Dan were, and he said, "I have to go to the wedding," he yelled. "It's the only way I could save my soul." Katie had heard all finally, Katie got a backbone in her. Katie got some spunk going on because Katie said no. She said she had all she was going to take from him. She said, "No, you are not going. You are too sick and you won't take your medication." He said, sorry, I had to look over my dog's always on the wrong side of the door, but he's whining. He wants to come in, but he's not coming in because he's just not good on video. Anyway, so Ed had said that he wasn't taking the medication because he had the devil in him and he felt Katie was trying to kill him so she could kill the devil in him. Again, back to Dave connecting Katie with the devil because Dave's a dick. Anyway, he said she's trying to poison him to kill the devil. Dan jumped in to protect Katie, to stand up for Katie. He wasn't doing anything violent to Katie, but he stood up and he said, "No, we're just trying to help you. We want to help you. We want you to be well. We want to help you." And Ed said he knew he was losing the battle. He wasn't going to win. And he went back in and he laid down. Now, Dan had a farm of his own. He lived a half a mile up the road. He had chores of his own to do. He knew he had to prepare for his turn to go to the wedding. And he told Katie that he left Katie and the children. He said, "I'm going to run home and do my chores. And I'll be back when Atlee gets here. And then he'll stay and I'll go to the wedding. And then you could go to the wedding." And that was the plan. So Dan left. And right after he left, the kids were playing on the floor. Now I'm going to tell you, this is a warning. This is a very, very, very brutal, brutal story. It's horrible. It's vile. It's treacherous. If you don't want to listen to it, speed forward a little bit, or if you just don't want to watch any more of it, that's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings. This is a brutal, brutal story that is coming right now. Okay. So as the children played on the floor, Katie stood in front of the sink and began to wash the dishes. Okay, Ed comes up behind her. Again, remember, Ed is a big man. Ed is 6'3". He's a huge man. He's a big, strapping man. And I say that because that's how they describe him, as a big, strapping Amish man. Katie looks behind her. Ed's looming over her. She turns around. She says to him, "What's wrong?" And he just wheels back with all of his strength and punches her square in the center of the face. Obviously breaks her nose. There's blood squirting everywhere. Katie's on the ground. She is still conscious. She yells to Danny, "Run and get Uncle Dan. Tell him Daddy's sick to hurry." Now, in the time it takes little Danny to run a half a mile barefoot in the snow to his uncle's house and for his uncle to get on a horse and get back up to the farm, this entire time, Ed pins Katie down with his knees, pins her arms down, and he punches and punches and punches her face, just constantly punching and punching with all of his might. It just goes the entire time, and he punches and punches, and this just goes on so much that Katie was no longer recognizable. They said she didn't even look like she was human. He was still punching her when Dan got there. He jumped on Ed. He pushed him off of her. He was trying to fight Ed. He said they stood up, and he said the look on Ed's face told him that there was just no stopping anything, and that he would be next. And Dan panicked and ran out the door to a neighbor's house down the road that he knew how to telephone to call 911. Um, Ed went over and put on his work boots, and he tied him up nice and tight, and he walked back over, and he continued to stomp Katie's face. And he stomped it several times until her brains oozed out of her skull. They were everywhere. It was horrible. Um, Now I'm going to roll down a little bit here because I'm missing this. I don't want to miss anything. Um, Now, following the brief scuffle with Dan was when Ed did this with his work boots. Now, I'm assuming these stories came from the children because that's who was there. I could imagine. I know they said that Enos was frozen in fear and Mary was crying. Mary was 3, Enos was 4. I believe Danny was 5. And I don't know if Danny came back in the house because in the story later on down the road, he only has the 2 children with him. But let me finish here what happened. Katie's face had caved in. Her brains were all over the place. Um, it said that Ed dropped to his knees. He undressed Katie. For some reason, he neatly folded all of her clothes in a pile. And he took a 7-inch knife from the sink and he cut, he took a steak knife from the sink and he cut a 7-inch ragged incision in her stomach. And he reached inside her body and he pulled out, I'm going to read this so I don't miss it. He removed her lungs, kidneys, stomach, liver, spleen, bladder, uterus, and heart. He stacked all of her organs in a pile and stuck the knife in the top like he had accomplished something. And I think he thinks he killed the devil. Now, that wasn't said. That's just my opinion. It's just horrible. It's a horrible, horrible story. Ed was satisfied with his work. He went over to the sink. He washed up. He told the kids to get your jackets on. We're going to Grandpa's house. He threw the Bible in the fire and told the kids, let's go because I'm coming back to burn the house down. So the story gets a little bit easier now, except for one part. But anyway, while this is all still going on down the road, the emergency vehicles are starting to come. The ambulance crew was there. They were told that it was a distraught man. They thought the scene was safe. It was not. But suddenly they see Ed again, and that's who described him as this strapping young 6'3" Amish man coming down the road, holding one child and holding the hand of the other child, and he's talking about how his people will understand, and they're thinking everything is okay. On the way there is another gentleman who had he was heading to the call. He was Assistant Fire Chief McLaughlin. He was remembering the prior year. He was one of the gentlemen who came the prior year when Ed was wrestling with everybody and was committed to Jamestown. So he assumed it was just another story, another instance with Ed like that. So when he got there, of course, people had started coming around. There was some gossip going around. He started listening to people chatter, and someone said something about Ed's wife, and then he heard someone else say, he's up there killing her. So I'm going to describe to you what he said. He described what he saw when he went into the home, and I don't believe this was him. I believe this is what someone else, a third-party encounter, because it's a little dramatic, but it's terrible. So here's what it says. It says, McLaughlin described what he saw when he entered the home. It's not verbatim again. I think it's a third-party encounter, a comment. What he found is he stepped up on the small porch and pushed open the front door to the Spartan Amish house on that cold afternoon of March 18, 1993 was a scene from a nightmare. The unclothed body of Katie Gingerich, one day past her 29th birthday, lay face up on the floor. Her skull had been smashed. A ragged 7-inch incision had been cut into her abdomen through which she had been eviscerated. Her internal organs lay on the floor beside her along with a small curved paring knife. Nearby lay a pile of Amish women's clothing. Meanwhile, some of the Amish boys who had heard what was happening had gone to the wedding to get her father. Levi and Emma were at the wedding, and they were waiting for Katie and Anna to come. One of them went over to Levi and told him what happened. He was visibly shocked. He gasped. He walked over to Emma, and all he said to her was, "Ed's not being nice to Katie. We have to go." That's what he said, and he was right. Ed was not nice to Katie. So needless to say, Ed was arrested. The affidavit noted that Ed Gingerich confessed. There were no denials. He said he killed Katie. He continually said, "But I think we could save her. I think we could save her." I did read an account of one officer who was interrogating him, and when he kept saying that, he was pissing the guy off, and the guy was like, he said he finally just snapped and said, "Dude, she's dead. We're not saving her. It's over." And I don't know if that shook Ed up at all or not, but he had said he had heard enough. He was upset. You know, of course, they had the trial, which included everything you just heard here, so we don't have to go over all of that again. A lot of this, some of this testimony came from court. The testimony was brutal, of course. But on March 26, 1994, a little more than a year after Katie's death, Ed was convicted. However, due to the fact of all of the mental illness and all of the proof of the mental illness, he was found guilty of, he pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but let me tell you what he got. I'm going to tell you what a newspaper said. One paper said, "A Crawford County Common Pleas jury in Meadville found Edward Gingerich guilty of involuntary manslaughter for killing his wife, a slaying sparked by a wedding invitation and committed when 2 of his 3 small children were in the house." It's a little less dramatically worded in the courtroom. He was actually found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but mentally ill. Okay. It's crazy, right? Defense attorney Donald Lewis of Meadville. Now, later on, his other lawyer comes in, and they're claiming that he was the lawyer during this. I don't know if he was an assistant attorney or what, but I don't see him mentioned here yet. But Donald Lewis of Meadville asked that his client be taken to Warren State Hospital. Obviously, how was that even not just automatically assumed? He said he needs professional help, right? So Dr. Lawson Bernstein, a psychiatrist from Western Psychiatric Hospital in Pittsburgh, testified that Gingerich was schizophrenic and psychotic. According to Mr. Bernstein, "We have a wonderful window into Ed's mind. It's all in the taped confession taken by state police several hours after the killing," which Ed denied nothing. And that was, again, when Ed kept saying, "For some reason, we could save her." I mean, if that's not showing some kind of mental illness, I'm not sure what did. But anyway, Dr. Bernstein explained, "As a debilitating thought disorder, schizophrenia causes some people to experience delusions and hallucinations. Sufferers may not be able to distinguish what is real and what is not." Again, giant rabbits at the window. So this other guy. Now let me tell you something about, I don't know how familiar you are with American court proceedings, but we have expert witnesses. We literally have people who live on the witness stand. I always say I don't really follow the 4 out of 5 dentist survey said, because whoever is paying for the survey is going to get the answer they want. You could ask 15 people, and if 14 of them say no and 1 says yes, you're going to say, well, 1 out of 2 said yes, because you're only going to include the 2, because that's true. It's still true. You get what you pay for. You're paying for a testimony, you're going to get it. Every now and then, it's pretty funny, you come across one where the person actually forgets what they're doing there and tells the truth, and they help the other team. But, then you have your professional witnesses who say whatever you want them to say, and that's what happens a lot. Excuse me if I keep looking over this way, but I'm making sure we're still recording, because after the first fiasco. Anyway, so there's this other guy, the other guy I call him, because I don't want to have 3 dicks in the story. His name is Dr. Harvey Rubin. He's a clinical professor of psychiatry. He's an idiot at Yale University. And here's what he says: "Instances of violence are rare among people who suffer from schizophrenia. There are lots of studies that show people who suffer from schizophrenia are no more violent than anyone else in society." Maybe. Maybe. That could be. But apparently Harvey here forgot about poor Katie. Now, maybe that may be true. You may have 99.99.99% of people with schizophrenia who are nonviolent. That's okay. I believe that. But that's not Ed. Ed brutally murdered this woman, his wife, the mother of his children, in front of his children. He cut her open. He took out her organs. He crushed her skull until she didn't even look human. If that's not violent, I don't know what would be. Anyway, this idiot thinks that he shouldn't even get any kind of mental help. He should just go right to jail. Guess who they listen to? The jerk. So apparently, I wonder how he felt when he cashed his check from the state. You know, idiot. Anyway, I have to stop calling people idiots. Harvey says there's no need for medical attention, just jail, and that's what they do. Now, Ed is sentenced. Pennsylvania has a two-tier sentencing system, which means I believe it says that the second part has to be at least double of the first. Could be more. Ed was given 2.5 to 5 years, which means he would have to serve at least 2.5 years before he'd be eligible for parole. Now, Ed was already in jail for a year and a little bit more by the time he was sentenced. So he would be eligible for parole in about a year and a half, 2 years, about a year and a half. Maybe even less. I don't know. It's Saturday. I'm just not going to do math on Saturday. I'm sorry. It probably won't work out well. Anyway, 1995, Ed goes up for parole. Of course, he's denied. He served out the complete 5 years. Once you serve out your full term, you are finished. You have no supervision, nothing. He was released on, let me see, March 19th, 1998, exactly 5 years and 1 day after Katie was murdered. He was released. He was 34 years old. I know I'm cheating. Drink up. He had served his full sentence. He was released from the State Correctional Institution in Mercer, Pennsylvania. No supervision, no nothing. After his release, he did move to a psychiatric facility in, it's called Harmony Haven in Everett, Michigan. It's run by the Amish. So I guess I was incorrect before when I said that I didn't have any Amish, any knowledge of any Amish mental health professionals. This is run by the Amish. He went there. He went to one in Indiana. Let me see. And eventually he returned. In 2007, he finally returned to the Brown Hill Amish community. He was not welcome. During the time that Ed was in prison, the community had met several times with local law enforcement, which is rare for them. They don't do that. Claiming they did not want Ed to come back. They were afraid. They didn't want him to come back. They shunned him. However, I did read one story where one of the elders had said because he had mental illness, and it was proven mental illness, he could not be shunned, but they shunned him anyway. I think his parents too. Yeah, I don't think they were that great, but I don't know. That's just my opinion. Anyway, so when Ed came back, he was welcomed by his two sons, who were both over 18 by this time, and his brothers, of course, Dan, Atlee, and Joe. I imagine there was 11 children. There must have been, if there were more brothers, I don't know. I didn't really look into that. I guess I should have missed all the deets over here. So Ed was not welcomed back by anyone other than them. However, as far as Ed was concerned, in the Amish community, they do not go to local law enforcement, which surprised me with them going there to prevent Ed from coming back. But when Ed was first arrested, he asked his parents to take the children, and they had Mary. And Mary, I believe, was 17 at the time because he was gone 14 years and she was 3. Again, I'm not doing math on Saturday, but I think she was 17. So at that time, Ed felt that he still had custody of her because they didn't go to the authorities. They handled everything within the church. So although the church gave them custody, that holds no water in a Pennsylvania courtroom. So Ed knew he was still her guardian. Ed decided that he wanted to reconnect with Mary. He missed her. He wanted to get some sort of his life back. He was devastated that he was shunned from his community. He was not welcome. This was all he knew besides prison. Ed and the boy Enos and the brothers Atlee and Joe had decided that they wanted to see Mary. I'm looking at my notes because I forgot about them. What they did actually was, apparently he still wasn't thinking very clearly, because they kidnapped her. Yep, they kidnapped her. What happened was, I'm going to read some court testimony here. Actually, this is the affidavit. Um, she and Mary were riding in a horse-drawn wagon buggy on Frisbeetown Road near Ed's brother Atlee's house. Clara said Ed's brother Dan jumped into the buggy, took the reins, and drove the buggy down to Atlee's residence. As the buggy approached the barn, Mary's brother Enos grabbed the horses and led the buggy into the barn. Ed, Atlee, and Joe were waiting inside the barn. She said all three men spoke to Mary and coerced her to accompany Ed. Now, Mary agreed to go with them because what she said was, if I don't go, he will call the police and they will make me go. Because again, Ed was her guardian. So he was thinking that he had every right to do this. He did, but, you know. Anyway, so what happened was when his parents were notified. Now, I read where it said that his parents didn't want her to bother with him or his brothers. They weren't worried about her safety. They were worried about them trying to make her leave the church, which I thought was odd because, I just thought it was odd. I would have been more concerned by the fact that he, has been in mental institutions for 14 years, and prison. Dan and Mary Gingerich, the elders, went to the state police. I don't know who did what or where they did it at, but they got them immediate custody of Mary. It was ordered that Ed was to return her and not have any contact with her. Now, I thought this odd because now Ed is now a fugitive because he doesn't have custody of her. If I'm assessing this correctly, now it's criminal because he's taken a child that's not his child, he's not the guardian of, which I didn't get any of that, or if that's how you put that together. But they took her to a campground where Ed spent a couple days getting to know her and talking to her, and 3 days later they were arrested. I believe it was April. Let me see here. Okay, they were arrested. He was arrested on April 21st, 2007. He was charged with the interference of the custody of children, which, again, like I said, even Ed said he told the court, I'm her guardian. And they said, well, obviously somewhere along the line, the state police changed that. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania changed that. And he asked them, can they do that without my knowledge? And I guess, because they did. So anyway, during his arraignment, he complained that he was still the legal guardian of Mary. He told them that he was under medical behavioral health care, that he was on medication. None of that flew with the judge. He was told to have no contact with Mary and no negative contact with his parents. It was reported that the Meadville State Police had also charged Joseph Gingerich, who at the time was 43, so he was younger than, or was he? Yeah, because he would have been, I think. Again, math, it's the weekend. Atlee was 44. They were both charged with criminal conspiracy to commit concealing the whereabouts of a child. They were both arraigned and committed in lieu of $30,000 bond. I did not follow up on them. Ed himself eventually pled guilty, and he was sentenced to 6 days to 12 months in jail in 2007. I don't know if he ever reconnected with Mary. I don't think he did. I don't think he reconnected with his parents. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. In 2007, later that year, in November, Ed was in trouble again. He was caught with a gun. He was a convicted felon, and therefore in Pennsylvania, actually in the United States, you cannot have a weapon if you're a convicted felon. He was arrested for that. Again, he pled guilty, and he was sentenced to 3 to 12 months in prison. Okay. So, all of this drama was pretty much over for Ed. I imagine he just needed some peace and peace of mind. And here's the lawyer I was telling you about. He moved in with this lawyer, George Schrock, in 2010. George said some dumb shit after all this. But anyway, Ed lived with them for about 6 months. It was in January 14th of 2011. Ed went out to the barn to feed the horses, and about 4 or 5 hours later, George's wife went out to check on him and found that he had hung himself. He had hung himself in the horse barn. He had turned a bucket over that was dusty, and with his finger he had drawn in the dust that said, "Please forgive me." He obviously died that day. He was 47 years old. His attorney said some dumb things. He said a few things. He said that Ed had been on antidepressants, but that he had apparently stopped taking them. He said he took him to a nurse where Ed swore up and down that he was taking them, but he was not. He said something stupid like, yeah, he was real depressed. I didn't realize how depressed he was, but when someone kills themselves, I guess they're really depressed. Good thinking, George. They also claim that he was the attorney during his hearing. It may have been one of the other two, because, I didn't see him in the one for the homicide. He did say that one of Ed's most painful experiences was his alienation from the Amish church. He said that about killed him. He did have a joke or two. He said they would find Ed stumbling around the house, trying to light his way with a oil lamp, and they would say, Ed, turn the light on, but he wouldn't, because, he was sticking to his faith right until the end. Schrock said Ed was an awfully good person and that he could have helped his community a lot. Now, Ed was, and this shocked me too, Ed was buried next to Katie. They did bring him back and bury him in an Amish cemetery, even though he was shunned. He was buried next to Katie in the Grabhoff Amish Cemetery in Crawford County, Pennsylvania. Levi, Katie's father, is also buried there. Odd side note, Levi and his wife did go visit Ed when he was first arrested, and they forgave him, but they said they would never forget, but they did forgive him, because that's what they do. I don't know how they did it. They're stronger than I ever could be. Levi actually died 9 days after Ed was sentenced, convicted and sentenced for not being nice to Katie. I guess maybe it affected him after all. That's all I could think. Now, I know it seems like I highlighted Ed through most of this story. This is a huge story on mental illness. I know it's long. It's an hour and a half long. I'm surprised it's that long. There was just so many details. Excuse me if you can hear my dog whining outside the door again. I didn't forget Katie. I did not forget that Katie, this is Katie's story. Katie was described as a kind, faithful Amish woman who loved her garden and her children, and despite all of this, probably her husband. Her family misses her. Some of them said they even still miss Ed. They said they will miss them forever. I did not bring up her children. The whole thing is heartbreaking. I would never do that. I don't know where they are. All I know is that I hope they are all healthy and happy and moving forward in their lives. So that's our story on Ed. That is my first video. I hope I did good. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like and subscribe button, because I'm going to try to do this again. Next time I'm going to try to do it without the dog crying outside the door. He's always on the wrong side of the door. But I hope to see you back again. I'm Lisa Deets. This is all the Deets. And leave your comments. Let me know if you want me to do anybody in particular. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do next. Thank you so much. Bye.